We just got back from our third trip to Sicily, and in our first two trips and part of the third trip this year, we've pretty much stuck along the northern and western corner of Sicily from Palermo to Trapani to an island off the coast of Sicily called Favignana. And this time we wanted to branch out a little bit and cover more area. So this video is going to be sort of a two-part video showing how we got to Selinunte and what we saw when we got there. Very interesting place, very worth the trip. So this is what we saw at Selinunte. It's known for having these Greek temple ruins, and it's just really something to see. It really takes your breath away when you see it. I knew I would be super impressed, and I was. It was really a great experience. I could stare at temples all day. I'll talk more about that as we go along. And the other part of this video is about getting to Selinunte, and we wanted to take the train. We hadn't taken the train previously, so we wanted to try out the Sicilian train system, and the train we rode on was very nice. And this is what the train looks like before all the people got on. We were one of the first people to get on, and it's very nice, modern on the inside, so it was a good experience. And one thing that I would say from our experiences in traveling to Sicily, we've never rented a car. We've always wanted to get around on transit, so I don't know if you can solely rely on the train system, but be flexible. We've had a good experience with the buses, different bus companies, to either go to the airport or from Palermo to Trapani or from Castelvetrano up to Palermo. So all of these bus companies are good. And one thing I'd also add is the train and the buses are very moderately priced, so you're not going to break the bank getting around. So it was one of the nice things about Sicily. So we came down on the train line that stopped at Terranova and Mazzara del Vallo, Nicola di Mazzara, and then came back up to Castelvetrano. That was the end of the line. And then we had to get a taxi, and you couldn't just get a taxi on the street. It had to be arranged, and our hotel down in Selinunte had a taxi come up from Selinunte, pick us up, and bring us back down to the hotel. And this is the hotel that we stayed at, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. And after traveling, it was so nice to go out on the roof deck. They have a beautiful roof and pool and chairs and lounges to sit on. You can have drinks and look out over the Mediterranean. Just a beautiful setting. And this is what you can also see, that fantastic temple. You can see it from the roof of the hotel. So we stayed in Selinunte for 2 nights, and this was the primary reason we came down to Selinunte. In this video, I'm going to talk about where we went in Sicily, in the western part of the island. And we took buses and trains and ferries and taxis to get to where we were going. So here's a closer up map of Sicily showing the boot of Italy coming down, and Tunisia is across the water. Malta's directly south of Sicily, and you're starting to see some of the main towns appear. Palermo, that I'll be talking about, Trapani, Marsala. And drilling down further, this shows a few more towns in Sicily, looking just at the island of Sicily, the whole thing. So we flew into Palermo, where we stayed a couple of nights. And then we took a bus to Trapani. And then we took a ferry from Trapani to Favignana, an island like 4 miles off the west coast of Sicily, where we stayed for a week. And then we took the ferry back to Trapani. And then we decided to take the train. We hadn't taken the train before. A couple times we've been to Sicily before. We really wanted to try it. So we had to walk from the port in Trapani, the Porto, like a 15-minute walk over to the train station. And then from the train station, we took a train that went down through Marsala, made a stop in Marsala, as well as other stations along the way. And then its final stop was Castelvetrano. And then from Castelvetrano, our hotel arranged for a taxi to come up from Selinunte, right on the south coast in the western part of Sicily, up to Castelvetrano, pick us up and bring us back to the hotel. And then going back to Palermo, we took a taxi again back up to Castelvetrano, where we caught a bus that took us up to Palermo, where we spent our last couple of nights. So let me show you getting down from Trapani down to Castelvetrano on the train, and then what we saw in Selinunte while we wanted to go there. It's a very worthwhile short trip. We stayed there in Selinunte for 2 nights. just wanted to film a little bit of the Trapani train station here in western Sicily. And we're taking a train in about 50 minutes to Castelvetrano. And this will be our train. It already indicates that on the board. Train Italia. It's like a little 3-car train. So there are, looks like 4 tracks total here. And I don't think there's any place to sit down inside the station. Maybe there used to be. And there's a B&B hotel right near the train station. And we walked over here from the ferry that we took from Favignana this morning. It's like a half-hour ferry, and then it was like a 15-minute walk over here to the train station. And the neighborhood was fine. So, just waiting for my wife to come back. She wanted to look for a place to get a Coke. All quiet right now in Trapani. There's another train into the station. Looks newer than the one we had. Ours is pretty rusty. Reporting as we're leaving Trapani, just so you can hear what the sound of the engine sounds like. One thing you notice going through the countryside, there's a lot of olive groves and grape vineyards, olives and grapes. It's kind of like the Midwestern version of soybeans and corn. You see some occasional melons. We're going through some little stations where the train's not stopping, and more olive groves. First stop, Marosa. Couple people getting on, couple people getting off. The thing is, all the signs are translated into English too, so, as well as all the audio announcements for the most part, so that's helpful. Out of the station, short stop.
Controls. Thank you for your attention.
So it says next stop, Mozia Urbi. stations are getting worked on them. They look pretty good. We might be waiting here for a while due to schedule adjustments. But I see a fair amount of people with bikes that get on the train. They're waiting for the train going north. The train just rolled in. Looks very new. So this could be like a single track line. And we had to wait for the northbound train to get here so that we can go south on the track, on a single track. That's my guess. And it's taken off while we're still waiting here. So you can hear the conductor. She blows a whistle. It's all aboard. So their station house must be getting an upgrade. It's pretty much what the countryside looks like. Also north of Trapani towards Palermo, like mountains along the coast, and then the inland. There's a lot of agriculture. So the next stop is Spagnuolo. Stations. It's a new northbound platform canopy. And I think this is a flow-through station. I don't think it's a terminus, so we didn't have to come in and go back out of the city. We're just going straight through after stopping. So this is the end of our trip. Big terminal station here at Castelvetrano. And we're gonna get a taxi now. Here's their station house. And they've got like a yard here at the end. So I think this is the last stop. Here's a brief look at Castelvetrano. Fountain right across the street from the train station, and we're going to try to get a taxi. And we made it to the hotel in Selinunte. There is a public bus, but it wasn't leaving the train station for several hours, so we got the hotel to send a cab up for us. It's like a 15-minute ride up to Castelvetrano from Selinunte. So they got a cab to leave right away, and we didn't have to wait that long. But there are no cabs in Castelvetrano, and didn't look that happening of a place. So we're by the sea, and we'll see where the archaeological ruins are of the Greek ruins. Maybe in this direction to the west. We'll see. And when you go to the Selinunte Archaeological Park, this is where I would recommend you stay. We're staying here and we really like it. It's only got 3 stories of rooms, so it's like 10 rooms per floor. So it's only a 30-room hotel, and it has a restaurant on the first floor. And you can see people coming up onto the rooftop, which is just fantastic. It's got a pool up there, and you can get drinks, and there's tons of lounge tables. I'll show you that in a second, but highly recommend this. And then where it's located, we're close to the ocean. You go down this street and go around the corner, and you can walk to a bunch of seaside restaurants if that's what you want to do. So, highly recommend this boutique hotel. We're really glad we found it. And their staff is really helpful too. And this is the restaurant where you can get a free breakfast included in your room rate. And they also serve lunch here. And then from our floor, the 3rd floor, you can walk up to the rooftop on the 4th floor.
Keep walking, and stop.
So, I think there's a big party here tonight. Let's see, Mediterranean.
And I have a pouch. Do you want a pouch?
And here's the pool. We sat out here earlier. It was great. You have tons of tables and beds, tanning beds. And then here's the feature attraction, one of the temples. This is the most intact temple in the archaeological park. So it's an easy 4-minute walk over there. And you buy your tickets. It was like 50 euros for the 2 of us. I think if you just walk around the park, it's less, but we got it so you can hop on, hop off their little go-kart train system. Because it's a big area. And they're still unearthing some of the middle part of it. But there's 2 temples that are pretty intact, and then others are just piles of rubble. And this is looking west from the hotel roof. So, anyway, we're really glad we came down here. We took the train from Trapani, and the hotel arranged for a taxi to pick us up. You can't just walk out on the street. We discovered at the Trapani train station, because there are no taxis really in Castelvetrano, so we had the hotel arranged for somebody to come pick us up. And that costs 30 euros for 2 people. He had to drive up and then come back down here and bring us back to the hotel. So anyway, great time. And everybody else here is having a great time tonight. We were the only ones up here for most of the afternoon, but now there's a lot of people here at night to watch the sunset. Really cool place. So here's the main temple you see when you come in. Really takes your breath away. And then, like I said, there's another equally sized temple behind it that is mostly in ruins. And then we're here on the top of another little hill where this temple is. I know one is to Apollo and another one is to Zeus, pretty sure. And maybe some of the ones that have fallen that they now just identify as temples A, B, C, D, E, F. They're to other Greek gods.
questa è una lettura digitale di quanto è scritto.
Just want to shoot a little video of one of the temples here. They do have it roped off. Very subtle. Looks like it's been rebuilt in parts with newer concrete to stabilize what's still standing. One of the signs I read said that you got these little lizards or salamanders running around. That everything was built in the 5th century BC. And we're along the southern Sicilian coast. We're in the western part of Sicily, but on the south coast. And in early mid-October, we have fantastic weather. It's like 74 degrees. That'll be the high for today. Let me just film walking around.
Qui siamo stati? Sì, siamo stati da là, venivamo su, ci siamo fermati fino a metà, ci siamo fermati.
And if you speak Italian, then you can understand what those people are talking about. This is like an ancient road that we're walking on. Kind of their version of a paved road. If you're like me, you could just look at this all day, but I'm just giving you a snapshot. So there's various places you can walk in. Where other people have blazed the trail. Let's walk up some ancient steps here. This is just one of numerous temples. A lot of them are in this state, totally collapsed. But this is the one of the two that still has its columns remaining on one side. How's that? So like here's one of the information signs, and they're all in Italian and English, so that's good. But they just identify this as Temple D, part of the Acropolis complex, Acropoli. And if you look here at the map, one place we haven't been to yet is the necropoli up here. That's the cemetery, mausoleum type place. It's probably in total ruins by now. So, like I usually recommend, I take pictures of signs like this and then I read them later because I just want to look while I'm here. Yeah, so if this isn't one of the World Heritage Sites, I don't know what is. I haven't seen anything to that effect, but it's gotta be the case. I'll have to look this up if this is just a rebuilt column or if this is the way they made their columns out of brick and then coated them with like a concrete like substance. Maybe that's how you build such mammoth size columns. But you can see here, these are solid rock. It's somehow they lifted up there. One thing when you're walking around an archaeological site like this, if you're like me, you're trying to picture what it looked like when everything was still standing before things were destroyed. And so there were some artist renderings on some of the signs, and I've captured them here, and I'll go through them quickly. It gives you a better sense of what the whole place looked like. And this is from a lecture series, I think, that they conduct at NYU annually. I saw something on the internet about a talk that was given in 2023. I don't know if they're still doing it at NYU, but it's an annual lecture series on Selinunte. But this was a neat artist rendering. It shows you the vivid colors that they used on some of the temples. And I also wanted to sort of get an overall picture of the entire 1,000-acre city. It got up to a population, they think, of 30,000 people, and that excludes slaves. And one thing I'll mention is that they used a lot of slaves to build everything. They didn't have as much machinery, so there was a lot of manpower, forced manpower. So that's one of the reasons I think that cities were destroyed, is the people who were enslaved, where they came from, those people got back at the Greeks or whoever built these historical classical cities. So it's built on slave labor, but it's still something to behold. And this is from a YouTube video that I wound up subscribing to. This guy, Flipped Prof, and he produces virtual archaeological tours of what things might have looked like, and he puts soundtrack to it, which makes it really interesting. It's very well done. I looked him up. He's produced like 3,000 videos, but again, shows numerous temples, and then there's smaller houses where people actually lived and where slaves were quartered. You can see a city wall built around the entire area, and this is just one half of the area. There was a river that cut through, and like a cove or a bay that came in from the Mediterranean, and then there were the other temples on the other side. It was quite expansive. And this is a screenshot from his YouTube channel. If you want to check it out, it's pretty interesting. I watched the flyover that he did, and it's amazing to watch. And then I wanted to look at what the individual temples might have looked like. It's just really amazing. And this temple was also destroyed, but they rebuilt it, and I learned a word for what that's called. I'll get to that, but you could sort of see there are some newer concrete sections that go horizontally over the columns that they've had to insert. And in the architectural and archaeological world, there's a lot of controversy about doing that, but I think it's good. And to sort of rebuild these, and I wouldn't mind if they completely rebuilt these, they try to use materials from the site, and then if something is so pulverized they can't reuse it, then they will substitute modern materials. But it gives you the overall feel and the scale, and it just takes your breath away when you're walking up to a temple like this. And they also built these temples higher up on hills so that they could be admired from around. And this is an example of what it is to approach this temple from various angles. It's just really dramatic, and looking down the length of it. And there were huge statues that were representations of the individual gods. So each of these temples would be built to a certain god, and they conjecture which temple was built to which god, like Zeus or Hera or Apollo, the various Greek gods, but those statues no longer exist. Here's an example that goes along with this temple, what the temple looks like, and then what an artist rendering of what it looked like when it was completely standing. The word that I learned, anastylosis, and in Greek it means again to erect, to rebuild. So I actually wish they would do it with more of the temples because this was such an impressive site overall. But having the temple be open air actually gives it kind of a certain sense that you wouldn't get if there was a roof built on top of it, but just amazing. Here is another, I pulled this from a website where they use the word anastylosis again, and they've done 3D surveys, sort of like I hope they would. It's called virtual archaeology, so that's great. So you can help picture the way things are better. Through time, there's been various artist renderings of what the temples look like. Here's another virtual archaeological reproduction of one of the temples. They weren't all open. Some had solid walls on the sides like this one, but monumental steps walking up to the temple. And these are not little. These are gigantic. And this shows what a temple might have looked like when you could look in and there would be the statue of one of the gods in the temple. And quite colorful too. They used a lot of colors. You don't get that now when you visit a site. It's all plain white, but they were quite colorful back in the day, at least on some of the walls. Here's another 3D representation of what one of the temples looked like. This is totally solid all the way around. This is an altar where you just walk up the steps and stand on top, I believe, of the temple, but really interesting. During the video clips, I was mentioning that this seemed like it would be a World Heritage Site. So I looked it up, and Selinunte is not a World Heritage Site, of which there are almost 1,250 sites in 170 countries around the world. And of all of those World Heritage Sites, Italy has the most. It has 61 in the whole country, including Sicily. And then showed a map. There's half dozen in Sicily itself, and we were pretty near the Valle di Templi, also known as Agrigento, and it's something I'd like to go visit on a return trip to Sicily because this is much bigger, if you can imagine that, than Selinunte, with several of the temples intact. So it was also part of the Greek Empire, which was 2,500 years ago, roughly, in that time period. Finally, this is the last slide I'll show. I just wanted to comment on one of the things I want to research further is how they built these. I read some things on the internet, but wasn't satisfactory. It just said, oh yeah, that it was actually more difficult for them to arrange the financing to build these than it was to actually physically build them. I'm like, I think it was pretty something that they physically built these gigantic temples. I would need to see more about it. I mean, there was no automated mechanized cranes back in the day. They did use pulleys, and each of these segments are just tons and tons. So it was just amazing that they built these into such scale. So it was so impressive. And the thing I'd comment on is when certain forces went to destroy these cities in spite or whatever, that was a major effort too, to demolish these temples and level them into ruins. That was not an easy feat either. I mean, these things everything was super, super heavy. So again, there had to be tons of manpower involved, both with building and destroying these cities. Just amazing. And just go into a little history. Selinunte, they say it was founded around 500, 600 BC, and it was only in existence for like 300 to 400 years when it was then destroyed. And when it was attacked, they say it peaked at about 30,000 population, not including slaves, but when it was attacked, there were maybe 20,000 people, and of those, 16,000 were killed. So it was a terrible sight to behold, I'm sure, when the city was being attacked, and the army that came from Tunisia to attack it had 100,000 men, so they way outnumbered the people who were living there and trying to defend the city. So it must have been a horrific ordeal. And then of the people they didn't kill, then they took those people as slaves to work for them. So back and forth across the Mediterranean, it went, one side fighting another and either killing and then taking people slaves or having the same thing done to them. So it's just back and forth. You can really get lost down a huge rabbit hole of history. But I just wanted to mention that quickly to give some historical context. So thanks for watching if you're still watching here to the end, and we'll see you in an upcoming video. Thanks for watching.